Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got a couple of concealed carry 380s. I've got the Walther CCP M2 chambered in 380, and I've got the the Ruger Security 380. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Manta sacks and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. Now, both of these being chambered in 380, but they're still slightly larger guns than what's popular for 380. 380s are often used for little deep concealed pocket guns, but there's a reason for these. The purpose for these is more about having a very light, easy to rack slide. So I'm just basically putting very light finger pressure on it and racking the slide on these. And both of them are like that. Interestingly enough, even though the slide looks lighter, it's an alloy on the CCP, and it is light. It's a little bit heavier enough, and the serrations are a little bit on the shallow side, that it's a little bit harder to rack the slide on the CCP, but still lighter than a Glock or an XDM or any of the other popular ones. The Ruger is just a super light, very smooth slide, and it's got these little wings at the back. They're going to be kind of hard to see, but the last serration, you see a serration here, and then the last serration kind of stands up, and it's higher than the slide. And what that effectively does is gives you the wings like you saw on the HKVP9 series, and those wings give you a place for your hand to land. Coupled with that, with a very light, very smooth slide, of the two, it is definitely the easiest to rack slide. Now, one thing I am going to do, this is a hammer gun, so I'm going to drop the hammer, and I'm going to do it again, and it's almost imperceptible. The extra weight of the slide from having to cycle the hammer is almost imperceptible. And this one, I'm going to do the same thing. Oh, one of the things I don't like about the Walther has a magazine disconnect. And interestingly enough, Walthers tend not to have magazine disconnects, but this one does. And Rugers tend to have magazine disconnects, but this one does not. It's kind of flip-flopped. And so what that means is with the CCP, if you accidentally eject the magazine, hit the button or whatever, you're out of the game until you put the magazine back. But really, it's the same, no difference in the slide, whether it has to cock the gun or not. But the Ruger definitely has a lighter slide. Ergonomics are similar, size is similar. So the Ruger is a little bit longer. I'll set them up side by side. Ruger is a little bit longer, but it's so little that it's hard to actually tell. 6.52 versus 6.41. So you're talking about 0.09 or 0.1 inches. It's just minimal. The height is more of a difference. So I'm going to put the flush mags in them. And I'm actually going to have to reverse them because of the heights. Now, when you consider the pinky extender, they end up ultimately being the same height, but if you had the flush base plate on the Ruger ultimately would be shorter. But the difference in grip heights is not significant enough that I'm going to choose one versus the other. And the same with the widths. The Security 9 is 1.02. Security 380 is 1.02, and the Walther is 1.18. The Walther looks thinner because the slide curves up at the top, but what you're trying to, when you're doing inside the waistband, it's the body of it that matters. So, but even then, that difference is 1.1 inches, not enough to make a difference. So you're not picking these based on dimensions. And even weight is close. The Ruger Security 380 is 19.7, the Walther is 19.4, 0.3 ounces. Not going to make a difference. So you're not choosing these dimensionally. And if you're choosing a gun in this size category, you're choosing it because you want the bigger grip. You want something to hold on to. I'm getting a full 3-finger grip on the CCP, and with the pinky extender, I'm getting a full 3-finger grip on the Ruger. Why is that important? Well, if you've got really powerful hands and you want a tiny, tiny little pocket gun, then you're going to buy a tiny little pocket gun. You're going to buy an LCP or a car or something along those lines. But if you've got arthritis or compromised hand strength or something along those lines, these are a real attraction to you because 380 has almost no recoil. You've got a full 3-finger grip, so you're not going to have a hard time holding on to it, and the slide's really easy to operate. So it's a gun that you can maintain, that you can service, that you can keep in the game, and that you can keep in your hand and get it back on target. It's not going to flip so much that you can't get it back on target. So that's what the attraction for these is, and both of these do that well. A couple things that are different. So the Ruger has a nicer front sight. It's a fiber optic sight. It's not a night sight, it's just fiber optic sight, but it shows up real bright at the range and easy to see. The CCP has your classic white dot, which is quite functional. However, the CCP actually has a usable rear sight. It's got 2 dots on the back, and there's a proper gap up front, so it's easy to use it and line up to actually shoot very accurately. The Ruger has a U, and you can kind of find the target. There's enough of a gap to find it, but the blackout rear sight, especially in lower light environments like the range stall, it can be a little bit hard to find that rear sight and kind of make it a little harder to do bullseye type shooting. Now, if you're looking at these as concealed carry, both sets of sights work, but my preference is that I have sights at the front and rear that are usable to actually make sure I'm hitting the specific target I intend to hit, not something nearby. Another primary difference between these is MSRP. So the Ruger has an MSRP of $369 to $389. Street prices, of course, may vary. And the Walther has a MSRP of $499. So the Walther's base price or manufacturer's price is significantly higher. Now you may look at it and say, well, it's a Walther, so of course it's going to be a little higher and I'm willing to pay it. These aren't manufactured in the same facilities that the PDP and the PPQ and things like that used to be. And I'm not 100% sure that this is at the same quality level as those guns. And the Ruger, there's been some, over time, I've had different good and bad experiences with Ruger semi-autos. Their revolvers are by far the gold standard as far as I'm concerned, especially when you get into the big boy calibers. But I've had different, experiences over the years with Ruger's handguns. This one has proven to be reliable. It works well and it works consistent, and when I've handled different instances of it, they've been consistent. Walther is known for quality, known for reliability. The first generation CCP did have some issues, and it also had a really weird takedown procedure, which is not good for somebody that's got compromised hand strength to have to pull the slide back and wiggle it around up against the spring and everything else. They have kind of fixed it. The prior takedown required you to have this tool, and you had to stick it into a hole and push something out of the way, and you had to get it just right. You almost had to have 3 hands to do it. It was very cumbersome, and then you had to pull it all the way back against the spring and lift it off. They've kind of solved that concept with this slide. So you slide this little serrated lever over and it releases and it comes apart much more easily. However, that slide is quite stiff and can be kind of a challenge to move. So if you're going back to compromised hand strength, they've made the takedown process less complicated, but they've actually made it more difficult of getting that slide over into the right position for it to come apart. So I don't know as if they actually solved the true root cause, which is people with compromised hand strength tend to need something that comes apart relatively easy and that the controls involved are easy to get to. And this one is, because all you do is you slide it back. Now you have to hook this and pull it out, which fingernail will work, but that may not be an option for you. However, whatever tool you're going to use to clean the channels and everything else can hook up under there and pop it out. And it's not available on the other side. There's really not a good place to get into unless you have a pick. But again, the same tool that you're going to use to clean this to get into the channels easily will grab that out. And some of them, after they've been run for a bit, you can get it just right and kind of shake it out. This one here is holding quite well. So from a takedown procedure, I would say the Ruger has a better takedown procedure, especially for somebody that is in the target audience for guns like this. From a looks perspective, the Ruger just looks nicer. And that's kind of odd because Walthers are generally really good looking guns. Look at the PPQ, look at the PDP, they're just good looking. The Ruger is really styled this nice. It has a little bit of ventilation here. It's not compensated, and there's not really, you can't put a compensated barrel in it. So that's more decoration, but they're interesting looking. Now, of course, looks is subjective. You may look at that and say, it's overdone, I don't like it. Well, they have to each his own. They both have 3-slot Picatinny rails. So one of the differences might be the trigger. So I'm going to pull the magazines out and operate the triggers. the magazine disconnect. I really don't like magazine disconnects. So that was an empty mag. So a little bit of take up to get on the wall. Kind of a longish, kind of a creepy and inconsistent wall. Of course, that's cumbersome when I'm trying to show a reset because you got to pop the magazine out and then pop it back in. Resets all the way out, and then basically that same kind of long, inconsistent, creepyish wall. It's not a bad trigger necessarily, but it's by far not a good trigger, especially if you're equating Walther with the PDP and PPQ triggers, which are bottom line awesome triggers. This one didn't inherit that trigger. Now let's talk about the Ruger. About the same take up. It does have the inertial toggle. Kind of a very short, very light, very defined wall. Kind of a longish reset. You're basically all the way out, but the overall travel is kind of short to start with, so it's not a big deal. And then again, a really nice wall. When you look at triggers, which one's got the better trigger? The Ruger by far. The Ruger is an internal hammer. The CCP is striker. But the Ruger has a much better overall trigger than the CCP. And that may matter depending on what you're used to and how much time you've spent behind a gun. Now let's get to the real difference between these, significant difference between these. And that's these things. That's the magazine. So you'll see the CCP is a single stack magazine. It holds 8, and that's it. There are no optional magazines available as of the making of this video. I suspect there never will be, and 8 is all you're going to get. Plus of course the one in the pipe if you choose to carry with one in the pipe. You get a 10 round magazine. It only has 9, actually 10 on this side, so it's 9 on one side, 10 on the other, but it's a 10 round magazine, and this is the flush magazine. And then it has an optional 15 round magazine, 14 on that side. There's the hole for 15 with a sleeve. And it does integrate well. It integrates smoothly and nicely, and it works well. And it does a little bit of a ledge here. Kind of doesn't center perfectly. It can move around a little bit, but I didn't get pinched by it at all. It worked well. And of course, if it has slidden forward, the first time I grip it, it's going to kind of push it back. But overall, the capacity and the integration of the extended magazine, which is actually available on the Ruger and not on the Walther, would really give Walther the win on the capacity game. And capacity can matter, especially if you're talking the same footprint. So I've got a gun that's overall the same footprint, same specifications from a dimension standpoint, and I can, I've got 2 more base rounds and then 7 more total rounds if I use the extended magazine. Both of these do have a thumb safety. So it operates opposite on the Ruger, what you're used to. It doesn't operate like a 1911. It hinges the other way. So it's a little bit cumbersome to put it on until you get used to that. And it locks the slide when the safety is on. Now it's easy to thumb it off. It's more putting it on that seems to be a challenge. You see me kind of swinging at it and not really getting it. But thumbing it off, it comes off really easily. So the part about where it's going to matter, speed is going to matter, the safety comes off very quickly. But when you're ready to reholster, you're going to have to futz around with a little bit to get it in. The safety on the CCP doesn't feel quite as nice. It doesn't feel quite as robust, but it works a whole lot easier. It's hinged normally. And you notice I'm flicking it on and off very easily. So I would say that the design of the safety on the CCP, as far as actually using it, is a little bit better, but it doesn't feel quite as nice and robust, as solid as the safety on the Ruger is. And you can not put the safety on the Ruger if it's not cocked, and that is kind of typical of hammer guns. So you have to cock it. It has to have cycled. Then you can put the safety on. Another note, and this isn't a difference, they're both the same. Neither of these are optic ready. Likely never will be. Maybe, of course, it'd be easier to put an optic cut on the slide for the Ruger if Ruger decided to than it would be on the Walther to do the design of the slide. But neither of these are optic ready. The last thing I would say is shooting impressions. They both were reliable. They both worked. And I found the Ruger overall easier to shoot well, with the exception of the sights. I had a little harder time locating the target for accuracy purposes with the blackout rear sight. But once I did, this was actually easier to shoot well, barring that. The CCP, the trigger, it wasn't a bad trigger, as I mentioned earlier, but it wasn't consistent enough to make it really easy to shoot this well, despite having better sights that will actually allow you to see the target better. Of course, focus can override that, but overall, I kind of liked shooting the Ruger better. And I think in the end, either one of these will suit your needs, but if I had to choose one of these, I'd choose the Ruger. It's got a lot going for it, it's less expensive, and overall, in my mind, a better choice for what these both are designed to do. But whichever one you pick, they're both good quality and you're not going to have a problem with that. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Player, Rumble. We're pretty much everywhere. And thank you.